All right, let's give it just a second to sync and make sure that people can land. I'm making sure it's properly streaming.
Awesome.
Yep. All right, we are live. We are here. Everything is up on
Awesome.
YouTube. All
Woohoo!
right, welcome. And it looks like we already have several people here live. So please feel free to say hi in the chat only if you want to. You are not required to participate. You are not required to give yourself away, none of that. But if you want to ask questions, if you want to say hi in the chat, you are more than welcome to. We should be able to see you just fine. So welcome. We are going to get right into it here in a moment, but just wanted to make sure everything is synced and you can see things. Good morning, Dory. Hi, Ike.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Kirsten, welcome.
Kirsten.
So excited you all are here. We're going to jump right into some introductions now that we know we're here and we're live. So, welcome. Maran, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, I am therapist and coach with Healing Hearts Love. And I really just wanted to do this course because after being, myself after my long-term marriage and my divorce, I went onto the apps and I had a pretty interesting experience for the few months I was on it. I met some really interesting people and eventually became really smitten and got off the apps years later. But I just saw so many people suffering and confused and scared. And I just thought, how can we help people feel better about this process? Because I met some really cool people that I really got to know and really enjoyed the process. So, I want to help people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for all that you've done
Yeah.
with this. And I'm Safriana Luna. I am a trauma specialized therapist. I work with all kinds of relationships, including ethical non-monogamy. I'm just here to help people have the happiest, healthiest relationships they can and have good communication. So just to give you a little overview, of course, you're here, you've signed up for the Breaking Free from Toxic Love Masterclass. We're going to do our best today to keep this around an hour, but we have a lot of things to share. I'm sure we're going to have a lot. We've trimmed the presentation like 3 times now to really try to get it down to the salient
We want to
points.
tell so much.
But yes, we want to give you the most value here today to really learn and be able to break free from these patterns. So we're going to give you as much wisdom and knowledge as we can. Again, we'll try to keep it around 60 minutes. There will be a Q&A afterwards. So if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat at any point, but we may hold them until that Q&A portion at the end, unless it's really relevant to where we're at in the presentation at that time, but know that we'll come back to it. And I just like to say heads up, after the presentation, we will be giving you a special offer for the course that Maran mentioned that has been developed to help people find love on the dating apps. So stay tuned for that. But let's get started. So Maran, do you want to share a little bit about why people might be here?
Well, they're probably here because dating sucks. And for so many people, it's a really confusing process, right? So many people go on the first date, there's no chemistry. They're thinking the conversation is going well and they get ghosted. They've been through heartbreak and trauma and they're like, I never want to go through that again. So how do I keep myself safe from ever having that heartbreak, but also kind of feel vulnerable and be able to be intimate emotionally? So it's really hard. We're trying to protect ourselves and protect our hearts because our trauma, our pain, our heartbreak is, it really affects us. And so how do we find connection and openness while being able to protect ourselves?
Yeah. So we're really going to get into that today, how to really anchor in yourself, even when you're going out and having these experiences. And just so you know, you're welcome to take notes, but you will be getting, if you have signed up for this via our page, you will be getting an email afterwards with all the slides and some bonus slides at the end. So you don't have to write every little thing down. So we're going to hopefully give you some hope today to understand toxic patterns and learn your body's own responses, kind of have a sense of, oh, well, when this is happening in my body, that's a signal to go deeper, maybe pause and look at what's happening in me. Also help you build a secure inner space for yourself while dating. And then we'll talk about integrations and next steps from here. So We're going to get into the toxic love cycle. I think this is the stuff that everybody's like, I really want to know what this looks like. So let's talk about it. So, Moran, if you want to share just a little bit about how we're hardwired and
Yeah.
why we attach in the first place.
Yeah. So when we're born, you know, our body is developed, but the only part of the brain that's fully developed is our reptile part of the brain, which basically means that we're trying to figure out how to attach ourselves to our caretakers to get our needs met. And our entire body is wired, our brain, our nervous system, all of it is wired to attach. Because when we're in a village, we are safe. When we're sort of the lone wolf by ourselves, it's harder to survive. So our biology wants us to attach, but especially to our caretakers. So as we begin to interact with other people outside of us, our whole nervous system is built.
Yeah. So this is from birth kind of stuff that ends up impacting us literally
Yep.
decades and decades later as we are
Yep.
showing up in other relationships. So it's not your
Mhm.
fault if you have some of these patterns, right? It's just a natural consequence of being alive
Yeah.
and being in
Yeah.
relationship, but
Yep.
we can begin to rewire some of these things.
And I
And
also say, you know, keep in mind that we don't even consciously really know that we're picking up on these cues, right? So if we think, you know, our parents are attuned or not attuned, we're reacting to these things just automatically. And then that's what our brain thinks real life is about.
right. And then that pattern, we'll get into that too. This like groove we get worked into where we're looking for that everywhere. We're looking for these patterns everywhere. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, what we're going to get into today is that we often recreate these patterns because
Yeah.
the bottom line is that relationships make us confront our patterns and we either sink into them and continue to deepen them or we try to change them. But our body remembers what it felt like in those early relationships.
Yep.
It remembers what that last relationship you were in that maybe mirrored those childhood dynamics feels like. And we talk heavily in the course about attachment and whatnot, but we're going to just do a super high overview today, which is essentially that you either grew up safe and stable or unsafe and or unstable. So it might have been generally safe, but your attention wasn't stable. You didn't get consistent attention or attunement. When we use that word attunement today, what we mean there is like another person really being with you, present in the moment, emotionally available, able to connect with you, listening to you, maybe giving
Seeing
some
you.
feedback, seeing you. Yeah. And a lot of us
Yeah.
didn't get that when we were little kids.
Mhm.
And so we're seeking that attunement. That's what we long for biologically. And so our body is reminding us over and over, if we didn't get that, to look for it, look for it, look for it. You know, where is it? Where am I going to get it?
We want to be
So,
seen.
yeah. So, attachment basics. This is like the super high overview level, but there are 4 main attachment styles. And I'll just talk about the secure real quick. And then Moran, if you want to touch on the 3 insecures.
Mm-hmm.
Secure attachment, most of us don't have. I want to really, really
Yes.
caveat
Yes.
that.
That takes a lot of work.
Most of us don't have our secure attachment online yet. It takes work in adulthood to go back and work on the patterns. But
Yep.
we become securely attached when our parents as when we were in our childhood, they were available, they were consistent, they were attuned to us, they were giving us that attention, that emotional modeling. Gosh, if all of us got this, we wouldn't have half the issues that we have, right? Instead, we tend to have more insecure attachment styles, which can look like a variety of things. So, Moran, if you want to touch on those.
Yeah, and I want to say that it's not necessarily because our parents were bad parents in any way, but you know, they're working, they're tired, there's relationship stuff, there's life stuff, they have to make a living, there's bills. They might not be as attuned to us and perfect in all of their interactions just because life is life, right?
Mhm.
And so we don't necessarily judge them, but we just like to know kind of what our brain and body picked up, you know? So insecure attachments, there's 3 different kinds. The first is anxious ambivalent, and this is where the regulation is mostly with the partner. They've learned not to kind of trust their internal process, right? Like maybe, you know, you were hungry and mom came in and changed your diaper and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't really know what I'm feeling because that's not what I would have thought it was. And so you don't really learn to trust yourself all that much. Or the parent is like really, really intense and then like kind of out, like, it's okay, I got you. And then like maybe stressed and like, okay, whatever, and got the wrong thing, that you needed. So we really kind of fear when people come in and out, emotionally or physically, and it causes anxiety because we want them to be close to us so we feel better. And so an avoidant is when we don't really trust that our caretakers are going to be consistent. So we kind of take care of our own nervous system and our own needs, right? So if we're hungry, maybe we'll roll around in our crib to kind of self-soothe and help us feel better because we don't know that our caretaker is going to come in and figure it out.
Yeah.
Disorganized is like wanting to attach, but like really freaking out to be attached. And then when something feels unsafe, like totally backing away. Because for people with disorganized, there was real trauma, right? Real big things happening. And they wanted to attach to their caretakers, but their caretakers, for every reason, were not safe. And so there's this like terror to attach to people. So people often say, well, I feel like I'm anxious, but then when I get upset, like I back away. That's not disorganized. That's a safety mechanism. Disorganized is like really wanting to attach, but really, really feeling fearful of it.
Right. There's more of a push-pull in that's more consistent and constant and feels really distressing because it's not allowing that attachment to ever fully establish. Yeah. So, and I think that a lot of people do end up resonating with several of the attachment styles a lot of the time, or they'll recognize like, oh, I do have some secure attachment coming in. And I do want to say over on the Healing Hearts Dating website, we have a quiz that helps you kind of, doesn't say these quite outright, but it helps you identify the patterns that are showing up in relationships that are actually subtly these things. So that
and after we've been through heartbreak and trauma, we may be sort of more one or the other, right? While we're learning to heal, because it's like, okay, I'm finding love. This feels so good. And I can be anxious, or like, I'm not trusting anyone because that sucked. And then we're kind of more avoidant. And then we can sort of learn our nervous system and kind of be able to do it a little bit more naturally.
Yeah. So again, this takes time and practice, but it is possible. But then we have another layer of things that really lead to these attachment wounds and the struggle to be in healthy relationships, because our social and survival ecosystems inform how safe we feel in ourselves. So I think this is just really important to touch on. Like, where did you come from? What were your foundations? Did you have financial support? Were you eating consistent meals? These kinds of things layer into how we end up relating. Yeah. So our physical needs, our relationship with our authority figures, our culture, growing up in certain religions sometimes can create attachment wounds because there's this idea of perfect love or self-sacrifice or things like that need to show up in relationships that, quite frankly, are not healthy. But we all grow up with these different stories. And then if you are a BIPOC person, if you have a minority racial status, if you grew up in poverty, if you have a disability, if you're LGBTQIA or Two-Spirit, these are also factoring into how you show up in relationships, because you might be facing deeper levels of social discrimination or prejudice. You might be a part of systems that have more communicative violence in them. So we're not going to get deep into this, but I think it's really important to just understand that does have an impact on how you are showing up in those future relationships.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, when we're the attachment conversation, right, is that we're learning how to either attach or disconnect, right? We're either part or we're not. And so all of these things can create us to feel like we're not part, right? We're not the same as other people. And so we're trying to navigate how to be like other people, which isn't really like ourselves. And so how are we different? So the secure attachment comes in when we have our good sense of self, and we're able to give different parts of ourselves to different relationships. And if we don't really know who we are because who we are wasn't supported by people that we really trusted, we don't know who we are.
Yes. And that authenticity piece is so important for dating. But what we know in practice gets stronger. So these patterns begin, they're almost like if you can imagine a dog running around in the yard in the same circle over and over in the grass, and it starts to literally work a groove in there. And you're not going to be able to plant new seeds in there because the dog's running around in the same circle over and over again. So recognizing these patterns, I kept myself safe by doing these certain things, which we're going to talk more about what that might look like. But I was trying to survive. And so I worked this pattern of survival in. That's what it is. They become automatic, like that dog running in that circle. That's just that's the spot. That's where I go and I loop my pattern because that's what's comfortable. I'm going to use big air quotes here. Comfortable in my nervous system because I'm used to it. It's not new. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's able to help you connect. It doesn't mean that it's helping you establish new relationships that are healthy because it's the same well-worn pattern that you've been in.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that that all of these things come from in relationship and attachment stuff. It comes from the reptile part of the brain. So the reptile part of the brain is just trying to remember everything as fast as possible to keep you safe, really quickly. And it might not be true, right? Like if you learn, like, when I yell, people listen, and that's what your brain's remembering. Well, is it really because you're yelling? What if you don't yell, right? So we have to question these narratives.
Yes. And question our patterns. Is this really serving me? Is it allowing me to connect?
Yep.
Is it perpetuating that insecure attachment, or is it feeling really secure? It's helping me root in and stabilize. So Maran, you just mentioned some of these, but we're hardwired to stay connected. I want to reiterate that. We're hardwired to stay connected. That is a biological imperative from birth that we've been talking about. And we learn to keep attention and to keep relationships however we can.
Yep.
So that might look like yelling.
Yep.
If that was what your parents did or siblings did, or you had to do to get attention paid to you, you might make yourself really small and pretend that you're happy. Yeah. So that people will stay attuned with you. I mean, I know that for me, my number ones were people pleasing and being attuned and listening without taking up space.
Yeah.
Because that meant that they wanted me in the space, but then I wasn't really in the space. And so how do these patterns keep showing up? What did you do as a child to get your parents' attention or caregivers' attention that worked, quote unquote, even if it didn't feel good?
Yeah. And I have a lot of clients who they were their parents' sort of confidants. And when you're sort of the confidant, or you're the one that's always kind of stabilizing the parent, just because of life sometimes, then you learn, okay, well, this is how they pay attention to me. And when I need something, they don't really know how to deal with it, or I don't really feel like I get my needs met. So when I'm attuned and I hear and I'm people pleasing and I'm smiling and I'm whatever I need to be, they're here. It's that subconscious that we keep doing it. So we're really good at helping our partners, people pleasing, listening, being empathic to our partners, because that's what we learn.
Yeah. And I just want to really, before we get into the actual signs of toxic relationships, I want to just touch on this here. We are ultimately responsible for our behaviors. So yes, they can be subconscious and they're in there and we're just doing them.
Yes.
But at the point of awareness where you're like, ooh, this doesn't feel good. I'm doing something that's adding to this pattern. We become responsible for beginning to shift it. So we can help co-create a toxic relationship if we're like, this is just my pattern. This is just how I am. I'm never going to break free. I'm always going to people please. Then we're going to attach to relationships that also perpetuate those patterns and reenact the dynamics that we had.
Because it feels good and normal. Yeah.
Good and normal, right? Quote unquote. So let's talk about some of the main toxic relationship warning signs, because I think we took the slide out, but I'm going to add it mentally back in, which is there's a lot of misinformation in the world right now and a lot of buzzwords about relationships. And everybody jumps on the I'm dating a narcissist bandwagon immediately as soon as there's like any red flag.
Yes.
And I know that's one of your soapboxes too. That people are like, it's not all narcissism. And we talk about this in the course as well, because it's not all narcissism. But if these patterns are showing up, you really do have a toxic cycle going on. So idealization, everybody goes through this in a new relationship. I want to really like
put everybody on a pedestal when we first start dating. It's those butterflies. Yeah.
And that's a biological imperative again, because the attachment hormones come in and they go, new relationship.
That oxytocin is like strong. Yeah.
Shiny, shiny, shiny. Let me attach.
Yep.
And biologically, this is from our drive to have babies and continue the species. It's
Yep.
all naturally occurring. But where it becomes dangerous is when the love bombing layers in. You are the most special person I've ever met. I've never met anyone like you. We are going to be so perfect together. And there's all of this enmeshment very quickly without the ability to see as individuals. The idealization is like really pumping up the relationship in these like really big ways, only to go into devaluation and disconnect. So this is the warning sign that you're looking for, is if there's all the sparkle and then pretty quickly, or this can be up to 2 years into a relationship where subtle criticism starts to move in. I have a specialty in domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and that is what the statistics show, is it's about 2 years that someone can fake it before any toxic behaviors really bubble up to the surface. But normally it's not that long. So don't worry too much about that. It's normally the first couple of months where you might start to see criticism, moving goalposts, nothing you do is enough, and maybe even language like, why do you always do this? Or if you really loved me, like you would do this. Like these sort of putting things on you, or maybe even you putting expectation on someone else that they haven't agreed to,
Mhm.
and that causing tension. So here at this point, we can like stop and communicate and work on it, or it's probably gonna loop into the cycle, which next is discard. So there's a withdrawal, maybe there's silent treatment, there's blame for relationship problems, there's all this tension and finger pointing, and you're too needy. I don't need to do this. You made me act this way. Those are the things that are not great. And then here's the kicker. It repeats. It loops back in to that idealization and the love bombing and the intense attraction. So that's
Yep.
sometimes called the honeymoon. And then the next would be called the tension building. And then the discard would be the acute episode where there would be a big blow up, big blowout, and then distance, or right back into that intense, I'll never do it again, I promise. These are the cycles you want to be aware of, not necessarily like we come together, we start dating, then we encounter some problems, we're communicating about it. My issues are coming up, your issues are coming up, but we're working on it. We're not yelling at each other, we're not demeaning each other. We're
But
talking
I do
about,
want to say something is
yeah.
normal human behavior. We can yell at each other sometimes. Like we can be curt. I mean, let's be honest. Like, we all are human. So what's the difference between this and like an anxious attachment and nerves is the extremes. I mean,
Mhm.
right? Like if someone's like not being kind to you, I'm not gonna say it's okay. It's not necessarily narcissistic. It's not okay. And so we don't say it's okay, but it's also not narcissistic, toxic if people are, oh my God, you're amazing. I really like you. That's also anxious attachment to a certain degree. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm really upset. And now, like, this isn't safe and I don't know what to do. So,
Mhm.
how do we navigate what is a toxic cycle and what is normal getting to know each other, freaked out, figuring out how to like have conflict together? And I'm going to say it's very obvious in extremes,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's like,
So,
it really is like, you're crazy, like, all the things.
and these are some of the characteristics of those extremes that you might
Yes.
want to be looking for. So again, and we'll talk about this at the end as well. Like there are regular human behaviors, I don't yell hard. Like I've barely yelled in my entire life, but when I get pushed to the edge, my voice does raise and I'm like,
Mhm.
this has to stop, boundary, right? And that's a natural thing. When we're like defense, that can be my boundary is violated and I need this to full stop so I can communicate the boundary. But chucking things across the room, slamming doors, being extra
Yeah.
belligerent and loud and getting in someone's face, that's an extreme, right? So, yes, we want to allow for the spectrum of human experience, but if there's criticism that's targeting who you are, making
Characterological. Yeah.
it's, really finger pointing, not a great sign.
Yep.
Intermittent reinforcement, what that means is also there's like this in and out in the relationship between the extreme, and yes, this is coming from attachment wounds, but Everybody has their attachment wounds. We're looking at the extreme levels. This like unpredictable, they come in, they go out. They come in, they go out. They
It's
love
like
bomb, they
whiplash.
blow up.
It's like whiplash. Like all of a sudden you're fine, and then all of a sudden they're yelling and pissed, and you're like, what just happened?
Right. Yeah. And something that's so important that so many people don't know here is that we can literally become addicted in the brain to the biochemical spikes of the stress response in these relationships. And if we had that childhood experience of these things where it was like my parent would blow up or they'd withdraw and then they'd come in and give me snuggles and smooches and tell me they loved me and then they blow up again and they leave. We're already used to that.
It because then I get the love and the affection. That's my value.
Yes.
I use a really an example that I like to use with clients is if your partner's yelling at you like, I can't believe you forgot my dry cleaning. How could you forget my dry cleaning? I never forget you. When I go to the grocery store, I always get your favorite foods. And you're like, oh, I forgot the dry cleaning. Yeah, you're right. That was terrible. Right. And then there's like a characterological flaw, like the anger, and you're like, okay. And it feels really confusing because there's such a difference between like, well, yeah, I mean, it was a small thing that I forgot the dry cleaning. I was tired or whatever. But then it's like, you're such an unloving, unsupportive partner because you didn't do this and I'm so much better. And how can you not meet me? It's that extreme where you're like whiplash, like, and the only way that you understand what the difference is that it must be you, right? You're like, okay, yeah, that was really unthoughtful of me. So it's when we're talking about extremes and whiplash that like, it shows that that's the extreme, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes this like intermittent thing can be called breadcrumbing because it's like you get a breadcrumb of love and you're like, oh, that was great. That was wonderful. I want more of that. And then you endure. I love that you used that word, Maran. You endure the span in between where it's tense and it's to get that next breadcrumb.
Yeah.
And that's, again, we're biologically hardwired to attach.
Right.
No shame. Right. But if that's the pattern in a relationship, it's not going to be sustainable. You're not really going to be happy long term. Reality distortion is the next big sign. We have a slide at the end that you'll get in the email that talks a little bit about the definition of gaslighting, but we can talk a little bit about it here. If your experiences, I love, Maran, you do such a good job of explaining the difference between gaslighting and having a different perspective. Do you want to touch just a little bit on that?
Yeah, gaslighting is, again, the extremes, right? It's normal conversation is like, we have different perspectives. No, don't forget, like, you know, you didn't email me when you were supposed to. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Right? Like I did, because we're trying to prevent the disconnecting. So our nervous system is trying to protect, to defend. Like, no, don't disconnect from me, right? That's different than gaslighting, where it comes from a knowledge of the person, and it is very methodical and very manipulative, knowing what your triggers are and going, well, you're crazy because this isn't happening. And what is wrong with you? You are way too sensitive, and all the things. That's very different than someone disagreeing with you and being like, no, I sent that email. Remember you said, and everybody used to say, well, don't gaslight me, you know, but people are going to have different perspectives and they're going to want to defend ourselves. Right? Yeah. You can go, okay, you know, but if it's an extreme of like, you are terrible, you didn't send that email, how could you forget me? Then that's the extreme.
Right. And or literally trying to rewrite a situation. You know, I'll just use an example of like real gaslighting without going into too much detail. I walked in, this is a decades old relationship. I walked into the room and saw the ex-partner doing a thing with my own two eyes, saw it happening and said, why are you doing this thing? And he said, I'm not doing this thing. Yeah. That's gaslighting, when literally you see something with your own two eyes. It happened, you know it happened, and they are literally like, that never happened. If it's, oh yeah, that happened, but I remember it a little bit differently. This was my perspective, but I'm still making space for your perspective. That's not reality distortion. We're acknowledging we're two different people who are seeing things from two different angles. That's okay. But if someone is trying to minimize you, deny you, rewrite your history to the point where you start to question,
you don't even trust yourself. You're like, maybe I'm not seeing it right. I mean, maybe the hand was sort of over there. I don't know. And then you don't even trust yourself. And that's what the nervous system breaks.
Yes. And so that's actually a characteristic of a toxic relationship, not
Yeah.
that like we had a disagreement. Isolation and control. So if someone, another old, decades old relationship at this point, um, in the very beginning, this relationship started to say things like, oh, well, you don't need any other friends. You have me. Or you don't have to hang out with your family. You can come hang out with me. Like it would be this gradual, oh, I don't like that friend. I don't think that person's good for you. And it was a
Mhm.
slowly isolating. This is something that people don't even notice happens because it can tend to be very gradual, where the support system slowly, piece by piece, is taken away so that you only have that
Mhm.
attachment of that not healthy relationship.
Well, I'm going to say
It's,
also, maybe it's not that, overt, but you're too terrified to leave the person because you don't know that that person's going to be upset or what's going to happen in your presence or if you're going to do the wrong thing. So it's almost like you become glue, where you're like, I don't want to leave you because I don't know what's going to happen. And so it might not be like, oh, you don't need anybody else, but you are like kind of terrified to, your nervous system is too terrified to leave that person.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then if they are monitoring you in any way, they're looking at your communication, they need to know where you are at all
Yeah.
times. That's, unless there's agreements, right? Like I am married and I love when we communicate, hey, I'm going to this place, I've arrived to this place.
Hmm.
I'm coming back from this place. So that I know that like they're safe and they're on their way home. But if it's this, like, I need to know where you are at all times, I need you to have a location app on your phone so I can double check where you, that's,
Oh,
mm,
paranoia is like, well, you were talking to this person, you guys must be having an affair, and putting like location tracking and camera. I mean, people really do become very paranoid.
yeah. And accusations of affairs are also often like a characteristic of a toxic relationship
Yeah.
too, just as a
Yeah.
side note there. So then after a conflict, so you have, again, every couple, even the healthiest couples, will
Yeah.
disagree from time to time. That's normal. That's okay. We're humans. We have different perspectives. But if after a conflict, there's no repair, no accountability, and then the same pattern repeats, that's that toxic cycle because it's
Right.
not moving you on, it's not helping connect you.
Hmm. Yep.
So let's talk about the effects of this. So when we're used to this toxic cycle, that's what we're used to. We're used to this intense attachment and then, push away or explosions or whatever. We start to have a couple of different realities that can set in. So let's talk about these. We already talked about questioning your reality. If you're starting to say like, okay, here's
Hmm.
my experience,
Yep.
but here's what this partner or this person is reflecting back to me, I might be wrong. Something's not
Yeah.
adding up
Right.
here.
In that gray space, it's, well, I must be the broken one because they sound so confident,
Mhm.
and you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, maybe, because they're like, well, you didn't do this. And it's like very confident. Oh, okay. And in
Yeah.
that question, it's got to be you. Maybe I missed something. And if they take a little tiny spark of like, well, yeah, I felt a little bad that I forgot the dry cleaning and make it a really big deal. So it feels really big to you. And you're like, I did forget the dry cleaning.
Yeah. And then you're like, next time your nervous system lights back up like, oh, we
Right.
need to avoid that again. And so
Right.
that is number
Yeah.
3 here, the nervous system going on to high alert. I'm now hyper vigilant. I'm anxious because if I
Right.
don't do everything right, I'm going to lose my connection.
Right.
And that's so scary for us because, again, we are hardwired to connect. So, this going back to 2, when confusion becomes internalized, that's where our confidence is really taking that hit.
Self-efficacy goes down like down the toilet when we're in these relationships because we're like, oh, we can't trust ourselves at all. We're terrible partners, you know?
Yeah. And so, if you are not able to trust yourself,
Yeah.
right, if the collapse of self trust comes in, then it's like, well, they must be right. It is me.
Mhm.
Everything else out there is a threat. This is the one thing I know. I can't trust myself to find better. I can't tell you how many people don't trust themselves to find a
Oh, I
better
know. I
relationship,
know.
quote unquote. So they'll stay in that one because they're like, well, I can't trust myself to go find something
Yeah.
that meets my needs because I didn't
You know
this
how
time.
often I see 1,000 times a day, "Well, I don't wanna go in the dating field. That's terrible." I'm like, "No, no, it's not." Like, when you trust yourself, it's not terrible. It's because you were taught not to trust yourself, that the
Yeah.
world seems horrible.
Yeah. And to just speak to, these are some of the patterns that come up like this. I'm confused. I don't trust myself. I'm anxious. I'm hypervigilant. I have no
Yeah.
self-worth. That carrying that baggage into even a healthy relationship, like a person that is securely attached and has done their work and can attune to you and
Yeah.
can meet your needs, if you're carrying that luggage in and you're like, oh, I'm still confused, I still am hypervigilant, I have no self-worth and no confidence, then you're going to be looking for that all the time. And that can hinder your ability to
Yeah.
positively connect. So,
I'm going to say one more thing when it comes to the collapse of the self-trust. These are the people that are constantly reading self-help books and going into therapy and looking at all the Instagram stuff about all the things like what's ADHD and what's the nervous system and, TikTok therapy, because they're trying to fix every part of themselves,
yes,
thinking, see, it's got to be me. It's got to be me. And
I
so they're
remember
like,
that.
like you're doing all the work on you because the other person's like, yeah, I'm good. You're the broken one. You're like, yeah, let me fix it. And you're like doing everything to fix yourself. And that's a really big sign that you've lost yourself. Because it's not like, oh, I want to get better at some things, I'm going to read about this. It's like you're trying to soak it all in because you're like, I want to fix it. Because if I can fix it, I'm going to be good in this relationship that I want to be good in. And
Right.
I have control over fixing my broken pieces so that this relationship is good.
Yeah. And there is like everyone needs to be accountable for their personal work, for breaking their
Yep.
own patterns and
Yep.
cycles. But that is a real legitimate
Mhm.
pattern. I again remember being in that space, going to my therapist and saying, the relationship still isn't working. Like, what else can I do? I think I want to try this therapy over here to like radically change how I show up and
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
and my therapist being like, back up, hold on. Why are you like, what is the other person doing to repair and
Right.
fix
And then
this?
those people will be like, yeah, I'm gonna call a therapist. And you're like, okay, did you do it? Yeah, they weren't really available, or yeah, I met with them and like they weren't good. I'm gonna keep looking. Like that's what you do. Hey, here's a really good book. Yeah, okay. I got to the first chapter. Okay. Like, and you're like, you got this like desire, and you're like, so yeah, here's an Instagram or whatever, and that shows that you're trying to get them to change a little bit because you just want to
Mhm.
be happy.
Yeah, and I always like to say, change is gradual. And
Yeah.
a really powerful and call yourself out question is, if this relationship were exactly as it is today, for the rest of the relationship, would I be happy? In other words, are we communicating? Do we work through our issues? Do we, even
Is
when
each
things
person
aren't great,
trying?
can we try together? Or if it was
Right.
exactly the same way it is today for the rest of the relationship, every time I bring an issue to the table, it's a blow up. Every time I have a need, I'm too much.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
probably not. Because again, a healthy relationship,
Yeah,
even if it's got tension and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because you're going through a conflict. If you
yep,
really look at the patterns and you're like, yeah, we have the conflict, but then we take a little bit of space to respect each other. We come back to the
I'm
table,
gonna
we talk
try,
about
yeah,
it, we
yeah.
try. That's what we're looking for. So,
I'm gonna also say, one of the toxic cycle patterns is that our nervous system is in a fight or flight all the time.
mhm,
So we have but so much capacity to remember, to do, to create, to be, to connect, because we're in this fight or flight all the time.
yeah.
And when you get out of a toxic relationship, it's incredible how much energy and brain power you have when you're not constantly in survival mode.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about that. Your body is wise. Your body has all of these signals that it's
Yeah.
here to cue you with, to say, hey, pay attention to this. So we've already talked about, you either feel safe or you don't feel safe. When you feel safe, you can feel connected. When you don't feel safe, you're going to feel disconnected. And as we've already really addressed, like your brain works into the patterns, it's aware of that reptilian survival and like reacts and responds instantly and gives us body signals to say, "Oh, this feels familiar," or "What's going on? Like, let me look." So there are two states of the nervous system. I can never remember them ever between the two of them. So that's why I have our little symbols here, the alert sign for the sympathetic, and then the little Zen brain for the parasympathetic, because our nervous system is in one of these two states at any given time
Yep.
or transitioning between them. So do you want to speak to the two states?
Yeah, and I was going to say from the last slide, it's important to note that these automatic things happen in 1 millisecond,
Yeah.
right? The logical part of the brain isn't even getting the information because it goes, okay, there could be a bear, just go, right?
Mhm.
So we may be feeling like freaked out or whatever because the brain is registering it so fast that the body is responding to keep us safe. And so it's really important to note what's happening, right? Is this an automatic thing that my brain's kind of warned me about and kind of taking a minute, So that's
Mhm.
kind of what we talk about in the next few slides. So when information goes into the brain, right, it's in the reptilian part of the brain, like maybe we hear something that reminds us or an emotion or a smell or something, the brain goes, oh, remember this could be a bear. And it shoots the hormones into the body to begin sort of that fight or flight process. So we either do one or two things in extreme. We either like go into fight or flight, or we kind of shut down and like stop connecting,
Yep.
So we do one or the other kind of in extremes. And so what happens is as these hormones are going through the body, there's the vagus nerve that goes from top of the head down the nervous system. It like shoots these hormones, which like it makes our pupils bigger so we can see, right? It makes our heart race so that we get more oxygen. It sends sugar, glucose to our muscles so that we can go, right? And it shuts down our systems it doesn't need, like our GI tract, our reproductive tract, the frontal cortex that does the thinking and the processing and the analyzing, right? We don't need those things. So the brain kind of like shifts where the energy is going. So that when we begin to kind of feel our body getting revved up, it's because it's shooting those hormones in, right, in the sympathetic nervous system. But then when we figure out, when the brain registers, okay, there's no bear, I'm not hearing the bear anymore, I'm not hearing any rustling in the woods, whatever it is, then it shoots the hormones back into the body to go back to homeostasis, right? What we call this the rest and digest. Rest, digest, connect, curiosity, play, all those things. So we have control over when we go up into arousal and when we can kind of come back down to that normal state.
Yeah. And I'm going to teach you today a really powerful tool for when you are in your sympathetic. If you literally can just remember this tool, it will help you get back down into that parasympathetic or that calm state, because it will prove to your nervous system that you're not running from a bear, you're not in danger. And it's so simple. So we'll get there.
Yeah, and I was
But
going to say the quicker you recognize it, like we feel small things when this is whole beginning, right? So it could be like our stomach is tense or queasy or feeling a little flushed or tense, right? That's kind of our body's way of saying like it's beginning the process.
yeah. Yeah. So this process, this is our little traffic light that's flipped upside down if it looks a little weird to you. Um, pretty sure it's flipped upside down anyway. Uh, to represent the three sort of states of the nervous system. So we just talked about the scientific terms of sympathetic and parasympathetic,
Mhm.
but it's either green, you're a go, you're calm, you're able to respond to yourself, to
Connected,
others.
curious,
Yeah,
playful. Yep.
all of that is there. This is a great time to do proactive self-care. Proactive self-care means I'm not in a crisis right now. I am calm and capable. So I could go take a nice, beautiful ritual shower to just like feel really good and maybe do hair care or skin care. Or I'm going to go schedule with friends because it's a
Mhm.
I'm feeling good. I'd love to go hang out. Like, this is a time to proactively do things
Yep.
to help yourself stay calm and regulated. But we start to activate and go into that yellow where we're starting to transition into that responsiveness, the fight, flight, freeze, when there's an outside situation that reminds us of one of those painful experiences of the past. And so the body goes, okay, do I need to pay attention? It's mobilizing now. It's going, do I need to pay attention to this?
Mhm.
Is this a threat? This is where your body signals, which we're going to talk about next, are going to start to subtly come in. And the more that you attune to yourself and practice this, the quicker you'll be able to recognize, oh, this is a sign I'm responding to this other thing.
Yep.
So this is when your grounding techniques can be especially powerful, so that you can nip it in the bud, so to speak, and get back into your green, back into your, okay, I'm calm again. Or it can continue to escalate into red, which is where your nervous system are in what Moran said is that aroused state. This does not mean what it normally means. It means your nervous system is on alert. And it
Mhm.
wants you, it's preparing to either fight, flee, or
Down,
freeze
yeah.
or fawn. So the fawning piece I want to just
Yeah.
very briefly touch on, because so many of us learn to fawn. Fawning can be that automatic people pleasing, the making yourself small, the of course I'll do that. And it's out
Yeah,
of a,
wherever you want. I'm happy to go wherever you want. Yeah, yeah.
it's literally a please don't hurt me. And it's a very natural pattern that we can get into that's similar to the fight, freeze or flee.
Yeah.
So this is, you don't feel safe at this point for some reason. Your nervous system is telling you you don't feel safe. And so the techniques that we'll talk about in a little bit are more useful here to actually help you regulate. So I'll teach you the no tiger twist here in a bit. But yeah, these body signals and attachment wounds. Well, I want to skip ahead actually to this real quick, because let's talk about these sensations. So you're going from green
Mhm.
into yellow. Yellow starts to come in, and you might start to notice some of these things.
Yep.
So ask yourself this question: what are your own unique trigger patterns and responses? When a negative belief or worrisome situation arises, how do you usually react or respond? So let's look at these lists.
Mhm.
Racing heart, increased blood pressure, feeling fidgety or unable to like sit still because what's going on. Scanning your environment, looking at someone's facial expressions and constantly reading them, like what's going on. Difficulty focusing on the conversation that's actually in front of you because you're in the past or
Mhm.
casting into the future.
Mhm.
And there can be a sense of racing time. This is fight flight response. Some of us are more naturally going into the fight flight response because that's just how our nervous system is learned to pattern.
Mhm.
Or the hypoarousal, the freeze fawn response can feel like I'm really spacey all of a sudden. I'm dissociating. I can't stay present. My body feels really heavy, like you might feel depressed. Your brain might go blank and
Mhm.
it's like you can't even attach to your thoughts.
Mhm.
You might feel really small
Yep.
and time might slow down. So,
One of the things that I think is important about this is you can feel safe. If you're hypo-aroused, you can feel safe. But if you look at that person in the eyes, it's gonna feel really uncomfortable
mm,
because the body's like, "Oh, I'm safe now." Right?
yeah.
So you don't feel unsafe. And I look at it like when let's say on a date, right? When we're in good mode, we're like leaning up and talking and laughing and like, "Yeah, so what was that like?" And you're kind of curious. But then you hear something and you go, "Oh, oh, so mm, what was that? What was that like?" And the whole body changes, right? And you
Mhm.
don't even know you're doing it. And then their mirror neurons are picking up the fact that you're distancing and then they begin to distance. So there's this weird, body language thing happening because your body is reacting. So I think from what I've heard and seen from clients, most dates when you hear something you go into hypoarousal because you're like, oh yeah, so what was that like, and you're not curious anymore, you're just kind of
Right.
now testing them you
Yes.
know
Oh, yeah. Kirsten just said that's why it's so hard for me to communicate in conflict with freeze. Yeah. When we
Yeah.
freeze in a healthy relationship, this is something we can preemptively do. We can talk about, I have a tendency to go into a freeze response. If I get really unresponsive or if I seem like I'm slowing down or I'm not talking much, I probably need a break. I probably need to go breathe and get back in my body and self regulate. And so we can communicate that in a healthy relationship so that they can help us when we get into that state. Because if it's not their intention to get us there, then they're probably going to be willing to help us get out.
Yes.
Whereas an unhealthy relationship is not going to care.
Yeah.
It's going to keep bowling ahead. But it is really hard to communicate once we're in freeze because the whole system is just shut
Well,
down.
yeah, and the communication part of our brain is sort of shutting down because we don't need to be communicating well when we're running from the bear. We just need to be running,
Right. Yes.
or hiding or fawning or something. You
Yes,
know?
exactly. So other like symptoms or body signals or sensations, these can be things that either indicate you're currently in a dynamic that's unhealthy or you are recalling an unhealthy dynamic. I want to be so clear
Yes.
there
Yes.
because the hardest thing to do is get into a healthy relationship after an unhealthy one. That is the hardest thing to do because again, our bodies are primed. Is this danger here?
Yeah.
So when we're experiencing that chest tightness or stomach knots, tension in our jaw, our shoulders, temperature fluctuations. Moran spoke to how people's body language change, like if it changes in the middle of a conversation because their voice goes higher or lower or shakier, things like dry mouth or swallowing, right? Nervousness, like I'm trying to
Yeah, we
swallow what's
swallow
in
and
front
get
of me.
thirsty. Yeah.
Yeah, all of these can be signs. If there's ongoing stuff like in the relationship, you feel like you have to walk on eggshells and you can't talk about it, right? If you can talk about it and it not blow up, healthy relationship sign. If you literally are like, the last time I tried to talk about it, it blew up, probably an unhealthy sign. But ongoing, when we start to have sleep disturbances, appetite changes, tension in the
Yeah.
body, all of these are signs of our nervous system's on
Long-term
fire.
trauma, long-term trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and we
fight or
need to
flight
go
is
back.
only meant to last a little longer, but if we're in a long-term situation, our whole body is gonna begin to shift.
Right. So yeah, feel free to come back to these slides and look through them and just kind of really reflect on what is yours. But before we move on to some grounding practices, I want to come back here. So how these wounds end up showing up in current relationships.
Mhm.
So we bring in our luggage, we bring in all of our little patterns, we bring in that confusion or that mistrust. It's going to look like that. We're going to bring to the table what we're bringing to the table, and we're going to see what we want to see. This is not to gaslight ourselves, but we're going to see what we want to see. So if the relationship is really healthy, but we're coming from those wounds, we're still going to be projecting those wounds.
Yes.
We
Yep.
have to reality check. We have to
Yes.
get mindful. We'll
Yes.
talk about that at the end too.
So
Um,
I wanna use a kind of a quick visual example. So let's say in your last relationship, this is just an example, nothing against football at all, but let's say in your last relationship, your last partner watched a lot of football and spent all weekends watching football, right? And you're like feeling kind of lonely, you know, you're like giggling. This nothing against football, it's just an example, right? But and so you're like, well, that person was really into sports or whatever, you know, and they weren't really around on the weekends. And I felt really alone. Monday night football, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. Again, just an example. And then you go on a date and someone's like, "Yeah, I really like football." And you're like, "Oh, no, no, nope, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to attach. There's no chemistry. I'm done because I've been there. I've done that. I'm not doing it again." And I think it's a matter of going, "Oh, I felt really alone in that last relationship because of it." That's okay. We can validate the fact that maybe somebody watching sports all weekend doesn't feel like a good partnership for us. That's okay. We can validate that moment. But we have to sort of say, and how much do you like to watch football? You know, like see if you can compromise if that is a partnership that looks good for you based on going, no, they like sports, I'm out, right?
yes.
Because we're validating that there really is something sort of there, but that person might not be our ex, you know?
Yeah, every person is unique. And even when the patterns appear the same, if we can actually confront the pattern gently, compassionately, hey, this thing, how do we navigate this, and you're able to be proactive and have conversations,
Yep.
then you can begin to rewire the patterns.
Yes.
Your wounds do not have to run the show.
Yeah.
So, how do we begin to rewire the patterns? So, let's create a secure space within yourself. I'm going to teach you some grounding techniques here. And I'm going to give you a 3-for-1 and we're going to do several so that we can really layer these in and you can kind of assess when and where you would use them. So if you want to go ahead and just get in a comfortable position here, hopefully you're comfortable already anyway, but I am just going to guide you through 3 simple practices. And the first one is called No Tiger Twist. So for this one, you're actually going to open your eyes and you're going to look around your space. So we're going to look up. We're going to look to the right. We're going to look down to the right. We're going to sweep over and look to the left and look up. Now we're going to actually twist and look behind us, down and up. And then we'll come back to center and just take a nice breath. What this tells your nervous system is I am not running from a bear. I'm not running from a tiger. There is no danger. If you are in a situation where you can do that and just look around, it instantly stimulates what Moran mentioned, that vagus nerve. It lets your vagus nerve connect with your body and go, oh, I am mobile. I
Yeah.
don't
It
have
stops
to
it from
run.
freezing. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is huge. I cannot emphasize this enough. I got a text message from someone the other day who taught her daughter this because
Mhm.
her daughter has autistic meltdowns, like
Mm.
full blown panic. And she taught her daughter, who's a kid, this technique. And she was able to stop the panic just by looking around and going, oh,
Mm.
even though my brain was telling me there's danger, there really isn't right now. Okay, I'm safe. So please do not underestimate this tool. And the cool thing is, you're out on a date, that little trigger comes in. You can just look around the restaurant or the park or, the museum or wherever you're at and just, oh, wow, look at all these things, right?
Yeah,
Just taking in
smell
that
your
sensory.
coffee. What are you looking at? What are you seeing? Yeah.
Sensory grounding.
Yeah.
So the next technique is a 3-part breath where it's just a triangle. And a lot of people like the square breathing, but I want to explain a little bit about the square breathing. Usually, square breathing, we breathe in, we hold, we breathe out, we hold, we breathe in, we hold. When you hold your breath at the top of the breath, it actually excites your nervous system. It gets it more aroused and more worked up. So it's actually better for the nervous system to pause at the bottom of the breath, at the bottom of the exhale, because
Mhm.
that's when the oxygen is able to go to the blood and actually bring our heart rate down. So for the triangle breath, we're going to breathe in for 4. We're going to breathe out for 4. And then we're going to pause for 4. And then we'll breathe in, breathe out, and hold. Breathe in, breathe out, and hold. So that brief hold at the bottom is where your nervous system begins to down regulate, calm down. So this is a simple, you can trace the triangle in your head, breathe in, breathe out. You can make it more than 4 seconds each. You could count to 5. If you're really good at it, you could count to 7. Breathing in for 7, breathing out for
Also,
7.
if you're already getting triggered, you might feel like you're drowning if you're trying to breathe, because at that point, the nervous system is already pumping your heart, and you're going to
Mhm.
be like, if that feels worse, don't do it. Do another
Yes,
grounding. The
yes.
breathing things really only need to be used like right at the beginning of the process. After that, it's going to feel worse.
Yeah, and remembering, even if it's like take a nice deep breath, flush it all the way out down to the bottom, and then just hold your breath for a second, not long enough for your heart to start racing and you start to feel panic like you're going to suffocate, but long enough for the oxygen to go to your bloodstream, because it actually, we overbreathe a lot and that
Mm-hmm.
makes it hard to stay grounded. So that
Follow. Yeah.
pause is like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm coming back down into my nervous system. So now I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. If you don't, you can just settle your gaze somewhere in front of you. Remember, if you feel unsafe or unstable at any time, you can do that twist and look around you. But we're going to tune inward and we're going to create a little inner sanctuary where you can go when you might feel that sense of panic set in. This little inner sanctuary could be a space outside, or it could be a space inside. But we're going to begin to build it by noticing things like, where can I sit down in this space? What is there to look at? So, first, finding a comfortable seat in this space and just looking around. And I really want to validate here that not all of us can see pictures in our mind. So, you might just get words or a sense of what's here. But noticing what you would be able to notice in this space. What would you hear? What sounds would be in this beautiful inner sanctuary? What smells would be there? What could you reach out and touch and feel? Is there a particular taste that's associated with this inner sanctuary? This is a space within you, a space in your heart that you can go to ground. So for example, my little space has a bed and a beautiful bay window. And I can imagine myself sitting on the bed, looking out the window and hearing the birds, seeing a little pond outside the window with koi fish swimming in it. So just painting these little details. What can you choose to focus your attention on that gets you out of that fight, flight, freeze or panic, to just kind of come back down into the body, begin to become present? Hearing, smelling, feeling, sensing. And of course, you can do this within, but you could also do this outside of yourself in your physical space. You could look around, see what there is to touch, reach out, noticing what you hear or what you smell. But this inner sanctuary is a place that you can return to, that you can continue to build details. I've added bookshelves and succulents to my inner sanctuary. The more real that you can make this, the more you can paint the little details, the more that you can return here in times of tension to find an easeful experience and begin to anchor your nervous system into the present moment. Because if you can close your eyes or you can go within, then right here and now you're safe and nothing bad is happening. So maybe you've recently come out of a date. Maybe you even went to the bathroom on the date to splash your face with some water. And you just need a moment. And so you can drop into your heart space. You can find your inner sanctuary. And you can breathe there and notice the little details. When your brain is focusing on the little details, the words or pictures coming in, it begins to drop you back down into the body, drop you back down into the present moment. And if you want to give your little sanctuary a name so that you can remember this space is here for you, you can resource that as somewhere you can come back to in the future. Even if it's just my sanctuary. So I'll invite you to take in the final scan of this space, this perfect little secure bunker or beautiful nature scene or room, whatever you've built for yourself, knowing that you have the capacity, you're endlessly creative. And you can add details as you return. Just taking one last look. And then if the eyes are closed, you can flutter them open. And let's just do that no tiger twist again. Just, okay. I was in that inner space. And now I'm coming back to this present moment in my three-dimensional environment. So we went through that very briefly for time's sake, of course, but this is a practice you can continue to build on. My little inner sanctuary, I have literally used going to get blood drawn. I've used it. I've used it when I'm sitting in a lobby waiting for some stressful appointment, right? Wherever you might need that inner safety and security, you can go in and start to ground just through those sensory details, that visualization.
Yeah. And if you're messaging with someone, let's say you're on the app, so you're texting and you're kind of freaking out because you're like, thinking something is happening, do that before you respond.
Yeah, absolutely. Like regulate yourself and put the energy out that you want to put out so that you're not in that panicked state. Grounding techniques work to help us get back into the body. And there's so many of them. These were just 3 simple, quick little ones. So let's talk about integration and next steps. We're coming down to the end of our presentation here. And I do want to acknowledge we're over our hour. So thank you for those of you who are still able to stay and listen. And hopefully everyone else will be able to watch the replay. But how do we move forward? We move forward with intention. And intentional in this case really means starting to listen to your body and go, not listen to your body as in I have to run away or I need to flee, but listening, getting curious. What's this
Curious.
telling me?
Yep.
What can I do to be in this moment? Is the belief that's coming up real? Is it founded in the reality in front of me? Or am I in the past? I'm remembering this past situation. Moran, you said earlier, do I need more information? Like, do I need to ask? Do you watch football every
What kind of
weekend?
sports do you like? I really like having a partner that's around for the weekend. I can make do on a Sunday or a Saturday, but I'd like to have the other day with my partner to do something fun. I mean, that's,
Yeah, just
intentional.
communicating and being intentional about that communication. So, the best response in the moment is very rarely to explode or to shut down. It's probably to take some space if we're in that kind of situation and we need to regulate. But we want to really get curious with ourselves. Why are we responding the way that we are? Is it what's really in front of us or is it rooted in the past? And
One of my favorite things to note is when we're having a conversation, often we can be curious or listening or processing and kind of look like this. But the other person always like thinks that we're mad, and that's the one that we do a lot because we just don't even know we're doing it. But it's like you can go, are you okay? And the person can go, oh, I was just processing, because we can really think that that's anger or a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I'll just get on my very mini soapbox here and say that there's 9 different ways that people use their facial expressions, and so we can't read facial expressions as the key of what someone's thinking or feeling. If a facial expression doesn't attune or match what we're feeling in the moment, we can ask. Like you said, you okay?
I ask all the time, like, okay, yeah.
I love that. So mindfulness is the way forward. Mindfulness literally just means being in this moment right here without judgment, not in the past, not in the future. So you're on that date, the person brings up the football, you're like, oh my gosh, okay. All right, breathe, bring it back down. We're in this present moment. We know Tiger Twist. We look around. All right, we're here. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Right? I'd like more information. I'd like to get curious. What's going on here?
Mhm.
And then you're going to practice strengthening the muscle of being in the moment,
Yes.
which over time will help you be able to attune to what's really there.
Yeah.
And we've been talking this whole time about toxic, non-toxic relationship, right? Toxic love versus healthy. A non-toxic or healthy relationship will attune, listen, consider your boundaries. You are responsible for your boundaries. You
Yes.
draw the boundary around yourself. So if you need to leave, you need to leave. But a respectful, healthy relationship is going to consider your boundaries and try to meet them. They're going to look at their role in the dynamic. They're going to attempt to take accountability and communicate and strengthen the connection so that you don't have to disconnect. Versus a toxic one going to lack that self-reflection, not have sympathy or empathy, blame, finger point, chase their own worth, right? Like all of those things can be the toxic things we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. And, I think it's important to note, a normal person will say, oh yeah, you're right. Like I forgot the dry cleaning. I really got to remember. Right. A toxic person is going to take zero self-reflection and information for the next time because we want to figure out how to keep that connection. So we're going to go, okay, yeah, I won't forget the dry cleaning next time because we want that connection. Someone who's toxic isn't worried about the connection. They're worried about whatever it is they're worried about. And so they're going to go, yeah, no, don't forget the dry clean next time.
Right. Usually their own self-image is
Exactly.
often the like, I can't do anything wrong because that would mean I'm bad.
Yep.
Right. So there's no good or bad. It's just how we're showing up in the relationship. And is that working for everybody or is it only working for one person? Because relationships are two-way streets. And so when you get triggered in the future, because you will, because we all do, anybody who tells you you can solve your nervous system and never get triggered again is making up some stories. You can absolutely get to the point where you can get triggered and you can be regulated within 30 seconds or less again. That is possible. I know because I've been there.
Yes.
But to start this process, you really want to get curious, what's here, what is happening in me, what is my emotion, what are those symptoms or signals in my body, like we talked about earlier.
This is the key to, we don't forget our past, but we no longer take that with us. We can, as much as we can, so that we can build connection. This is the key.
Yes. And then what's the story I'm telling myself around what's happening? Because a lot of times we're literally making up stories.
Yeah.
Oh, my new partner, I forgot the dry cleaning, whatever. That wouldn't be a new partner, but oh, I forgot to text them when I got home. Could be a good example. Now I'm telling myself the story that I'm an awful person because I didn't text when I get home because
I'm
this
such a
past relationship.
failure. I didn't do what I said I was going to do. I'm such a failure. I'm such a terrible partner. Yeah.
Right. And now they're going to hate me and we're never going to succeed in the relationship. And now I'm going to run away. Like, we start to tell these stories and then that happens, it plays out. So what evidence actually supports your story here in this moment versus what evidence does not support your story here in this moment? And then you can see what happens next. What do I need? Do I need to ask them for more information, give myself time to process? Do I actually need to leave the situation because it's not healthy?
Right.
Or do I need to communicate a boundary and see if they can respect that? And remember, boundaries need to be communicated.
Yep.
You have to communicate your boundaries. No one can guess that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is that they then respect that boundary for the relationship to work so that trust can be built.
And that we want to respond and not react.
Yes, absolutely. So here's our final reminders. Remember that some things are human behavior, not red flags. We all get defensive. And I know, Moran, you speak to this so beautifully. We all do our human behaviors.
Yeah.
So we may have a different perspective of something that happened. We might have different attachment styles. We might sometimes need validation from another person because we're worried
a lot,
or
especially
scared.
when you get to know someone. Just hearing like, I really like you. You're really cool. You're really, attractive, whatever. It's nice to hear that. So to say, we have to get like this self-efficacy from other people. There's a little bit of us, but we also like to have confirmation. That's normal.
Yeah.
To a certain degree,
Yeah. When it's constant and they need you to validate them for everything all the time.
Make them feel good. Yeah.
And they're not giving something reciprocally, like those are different. But when it's literally this human stuff, I'm attempting to stay connected to you, so I got a little defensive. I'm so sorry. Let me back off my defensiveness and meet with you again, right? We're looking for these healthy communications.
Mm-hmm.
So we are ready for our Q&A. So at this point in time, if you have any pressing questions that you'd like us to answer, please feel free to pop those in the chat. And otherwise, I'm just going to recap while people are typing that the toxic love cycle is one that can be broken. It starts from those attachment patterns and wounds that started in childhood that we reenacted, or pardon my cat sneezing, that we got disconnected in relationships and attempted to reconnect. So we might have picked up some unhealthy coping mechanisms or way of showing up in the relationship. But through nervous system regulation, we can begin to come back down and actually see what's in front of us with intention and mindfulness. Is there anything?
How appropriate that the cat is getting it all out. Like,
right here at the end.
Trauma. Like, I'm just getting it out. That's what we should all be doing.
Oh my gosh. I love it. So while we're waiting for any other questions, we are going to talk briefly about our course here. But please don't hesitate to keep typing in the chat if there is something you want us to answer, because we'll hang out for another minute or two just in case people are typing. But Moran and I developed, alongside another therapist turned relationship coach, a very comprehensive course for if you are a person trying to find love on the dating apps. And this course is available online. It's self-paced, and you can get extra support if you want. You can find all of that on the website. But the special that we have is, if thanks to you coming to this masterclass and starting the first steps, we'd like to reward that with a $125 off the course fee, bringing it down to $222. So, and there is a 2-pay option as well that would bring it down to 2 payments of $111. But this course is here, talks about literally so many things in depth that we talked about today. We get into understanding yourself, your attachment style, how you cope, how you can rewire, why you're uncomfortable. We talk about dating yourself, moving into the dating world and creating profiles that are authentic and aligned. And then we get into what communication looks like and how to keep dating with discernment and really fine tune between those green flags, yellow flags, red flags, and all of the above. So we would be absolutely delighted if you'd check it out. We're very proud of it and hope that it will benefit you and or someone you know or love. And then, of course, there's our Facebook community if you want to join that. I'll pop the links in the chat, but let's come over to our questions.
Yeah, Kirsten had a question.
Yeah.
How do we assess our narrative without overthinking? I also had a thought that what if I told myself I'm not wrong, but I'm right, but I'm wrong? I can elaborate if necessary. Good question.
Yeah. You want to start and then I'll jump in?
So we're never wrong, right? I think there's a really important aspect to say if we're feeling something, then there's a baseline of something. And what is that thing? We go deeper into what do I need? What am I protecting myself against? And then being able to communicate that from the frontal cortex of, hey, I really, I want a partner that's around on the weekend. It's not wrong. We don't need to react unless we feel like it's something we really need to protect ourselves from in this moment. So you're never wrong. It's just about what is the emotion telling you? And then what do you do next about it?
Yeah. So we all carry stories from the past, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the overthinking really comes in when we're trying to puzzle out how does this fit together?
Yeah.
And how does this connect to all of the past and future and present things? That's where I really see overthinking coming in, is it is attempting to make sense of the uncertain.
Yeah,
So
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're just trying to make sense of things. You're trying to fit them together. But if you're actually, this is where the mindfulness comes in. And I'm wondering, you're welcome to elaborate if there's more details that we're missing. But if you're looking at a relationship and you're like, I'm not sure if this is the right relationship for me, there's these signs, and is this good? Is this bad? Some of us can really fret and overthink that. Again, what's your body signaling to you when you're with that person? Is your body initially calm until you get in your head and you start to think and then it activates? Or are you walking in and you're on eggshells and they're irritable and you can tell, and you're managing their emotions because it's so obvious, and then you're trying to convince yourself and overthink like, oh, well, I can fix them. It'll be fine. If I just show up and I'm the perfect person and the perfect partner, then
I can fix me and then they're fine. Yeah.
Right. No, listen to those body signals. If you are overthinking, get back in your body. Look around, do the no tiger twist, do some sensory work, get in your body, and then get mindful. What's actually in front of me? Because, I've navigated this in relationships, both as a traumatized person and in relationship with other traumatized people, because we're all traumatized in our own ways, is, if I'm bringing my trauma to the table that says, if I tell my truth, I'm going to get yelled at.
Yes.
I can immediately test that.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just going to be happy and not have to say anything. Yeah.
So we can immediately test that. Now it's scary as hell to test that. I want to validate that. But if we're like, okay, I'm going to go into the relationship and I'm going to say my truth. I'm going to share that I'm worried. I've noticed you doing this thing and I don't really love this thing. Is there anything we can do about that? Or, how do we negotiate or compromise or whatever, and kind of come to a middle ground? What does that look like? And the person blows up on us. Immediate information. If they're like, oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. Like, let's talk about that. I didn't mean that way. And there's communication and accountability. And then you're getting information. If you're overthinking, get into your body and then seek information. So that would be how I would respond to that. And Larkenna says, I'm an overthinker myself. I've had to learn what overthinking feels like and often need to ask for a reality check from family and friends. Yes. Like, again, when we're overthinking, totally normal. It's us trying to contend with the uncertain, make sense of things, fit the pieces together, figure out what we can do. But that's probably future forecasting based on the past.
When we feel something in our body, and you can talk about what it feels like for you, but when we feel something in our body, it's anxiety. When there's a knowing, that's our intuition.
Yes. When you deeply know something, that's great. And a lot of us do lose sense of our intuition if we've
Mhm.
experienced that trauma, or especially those caregivers that we're trying to attune to and they're unattuned to us, or you know, we
Mhm.
need we need food and they give us water, right? They give
Yes.
us what we don't need, and then we're like, well, are my signals wrong? um, we can begin to build that intuition muscle back in.
Yep.
We can use grounding techniques. We can uh, assess. We can look at mindfully, you know, what just happened and how did I feel and what were my signals and
Yep.
what did I pick up on, and start to really expand that. Kirsten says, this feels like such an important lesson in authenticity, being mindful and not overthinking or finding reason or making sense to everything because control feels safe. Yes, control feels safe. Uncertainty feels really unsafe. I was
Okay.
on a workshop yesterday, actually, with another fellow therapist. And she was talking about how the most uncomfortable human emotion is not shame, it's not fear, it's not disappointment, it's uncertainty.
Yes. Oh gosh, that's true.
It's
We
so
avoid it
true.
like the plague. Oh my God. We do everything we can.
We want to control things.
Yeah.
We want to feel safe. And
Mhm.
so, yes, authenticity, if you cannot be who you truly are in a relationship, it's not the right relationship for you. Now, that does not mean you're authentic, throwing your triggers at everyone and projecting your
Right.
fear and
Right.
shame and disappointment and whatever else on people all the time. It means I really long for a relationship where I can connect in these ways and we can do these sorts of activities together. And of course, we're individuals and we have separateness, and that separateness allows us to come together as a unit and a
Yeah.
couple to co create safety and experiences. And then we can separate and we can come back, and we can
Yeah.
separate and we
You
can come
care
back.
enough about me feeling good that even if this isn't your love language, you're going to at least try because you want me to feel okay, and vice versa.
Yes. Yeah.
Authenticity. Yeah.
That's why the mindfulness comes in. Like, what is here in this
Yep.
present moment, which is so hard to do if we're already activated in that like fight flight. And that's why we have to triage. We need to figure out how to bring ourselves back down into regulation so we can get present with
Yep.
what's here right now. But yeah, I really feel you on the overthinking thing.
And
I think all of us do.
we can actually practice this with our family and our friends that we trust, right? When I tell my family, this is what I feel, this is what I need, and there can be more receptive, we can then change the neuroplasticity so that's a little easier to do when we're navigating a romantic relationship.
Yeah. We talked about that, you know, what you pattern really sinks into the brain, but
Mhm.
you can reopen those pathways and create new things.
Yeah.
And again, Moran and I are both therapists. We have storehouses of knowledge about techniques. So please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us or both of us to come join the Facebook, to get on. Most of you that are watching this are already on the email list. So to stay on the email list for upcoming resources, because you know, especially Moran, this is Moran's heart project and soul project. And she really just wants people to be in happier, healthier
Yeah.
relationships and be able to communicate. So reach out if you need that support.
Yeah. Loneliness is our new pandemic. And people want connection, but they're too afraid of it. And I want people to feel empowered in themselves, that we may not trust them, but we trust ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. So work on your self trust. That's number one. And that really does come by knowing that you've got your own back, by knowing that you can regulate your nervous system. I mentioned earlier that I can now regulate myself in 30 seconds or less
Yeah.
from almost any trigger because I practiced when I would get triggered. I would
Yep.
practice breathing. I would practice moving my body, like literally just doing a stretch, mobilizing your body a little bit, doing that
Yep.
no tiger twist. Now it's like,
Yep.
okay, right here, right now, I am safe and nothing bad is happening.
I've also rewired my body so it doesn't feel like it has to scream at me, right? If I get a little bit of a twinge in my stomach, I'm like, oh, something's happening. What's
Yeah, what's
happening?
that?
Right? But that was not the case many, many years ago before I started this process, but then my body's like, oh, we're going to let you know. And then you're just going to figure, I know what I feel now. I know
Yes.
what's going on. I don't need it to yell at me anymore.
Yeah,
And I
that's
trust
building
myself.
that trust.
Yeah.
Yes. So we'll give just another minute for any other questions. But just as a logistical
Mhm.
point, an email will be coming out here shortly with the replay. with the slides so you can review them. And there are 2 additional slides. I'll just give you a sneaky peeky of them real quick. There is another slide that gets into some common terms: trauma bonding, triggering versus discomfort, gaslighting, and love bombing. And then there's this other emotional regulation tool where
Practice. Use this all the time.
get to know what your emotions look
Then
like.
the rewiring can happen the more you do this.
Yes. Because, surface level, it might be, I feel scared, but then we get into it and it's, oh, well, I really feel disconnected. I'm longing for connection. Like, we have to kind of get into what our emotions are trying to communicate with us.
Yep.
And the body, your body and your emotions are just communicating. They're not good. They're not bad. They're just communicating. So get curious and mindful. Oh, I feel really at ease. I feel relaxed. That might mean that this is really healthy. Yes, the wheel.
Listen, it was real, yeah.
So use these tools, and we are wishing you all the dating success in the world, the relational success in the world. That's what we're here for.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say today, Maron, before we wrap?
No, begin to trust yourself.
Yeah. And we believe in you.
The toxic relationship is about them needing constant satiation, and not that you can't trust yourself.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world will show you that, because if the rest of the world shows you that you're normal, then you can go, oh, maybe I'm going to look at that instead of what's happening in my relationship, because that's not a facade. That's really you. And you can begin to trust that if you need help before you find yourself.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, thank you all for being here. We're so glad that
joining us.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Whether you joined live or in the replay, we appreciate you taking this time to work on yourself, because I believe, this is what I'm going to leave everyone with, that the most powerful thing we can do to change the world is to learn to love ourselves.
Yes.
If all of us would just love ourselves, we'd be in a very different place. So thank you so much. Glad that you enjoyed it, and look out for that email with all of the resources. All right. Bye for now.